To start, you've got a new film coming out, The Duel, and it's really a special one for you. It's a group of friends who came together during the pandemic to make a project that we haven't seen in cinema in a while. How did this genesis of this project first come across your desk? And what was it about this character that resonated with you?
I mean, this film's pretty remarkable in that it was one of the quickest uh, page to screen transitions that I've seen. I'm not sure if it's a record breaker, but it certainly felt like it. Of course, the industry was in a way starving for content during the pandemic because so many things had shut down, and there were so many people left high and dry by projects that they'd blocked out time for. It was a very stressful time for the industry itself. Um, to run the risk of personifying an industry, but like that's what it felt like. And so when this turned up, the timing was perfect. I mean, these are two dear friends of mine, Luke Spencer Roberts and Justin Matthews, who during I guess one of the heights of the pandemic, one of the real lockdowns in Los Angeles, they got together, they wrote it. Pretty lickety split too. I think it was like a week or so, and then they had a
Mm.
something like a finished script, and I was lucky enough to be one of the first people they sent it to, just as a kind of a demographic gauge, just to see how people like them and like us would respond to it. And my first thought when I read it was like, I've got to be a part of this, not only because my friends were making it, but because it was a script that genuinely resonated with me in a way that a lot of scripts don't. Oftentimes,
Mm.
I think people outside of the industry often assume that an actor, especially at like my level and below, um, has a more active hand in choosing their roles than we really do. Oftentimes, you're just grateful to have been given an opportunity, and you work for work's sake, and then you almost learn to love it after the fact. Um, and that's a large chunk of the professionalism in the industry, is just kind of like going with the flow, and then just running on the gratitude. But fortunately, with this script, I was obsessed with it, and I couldn't see a future where I wasn't involved in it in some way. And then, they cast myself and Dylan as these two leads. Unfortunately, it was also a character that was close enough to me that I didn't really have to do that much, creative mining to find him. So all in all, it was just a dream come true. Yeah.
While the circumstances that have led Woody and Colin to this duel aren't things to laugh about, it's everything that leads up to that point that's comedic gold. And your character and Dylan's character are kind of more straight-laced, especially when you compare to somebody like Patrick or Denny or Hart's characters. But you also have those moments of levity. How hard was it for you not to break in between scenes? What was it like working with Luke and Justin to find those moments where you could show off your own comedic chops?
Yeah. In terms of breaking, it happened a lot. Um, I do think that there's a comfort, and there's a freedom, and there's perhaps like a not very practical air of permission to fuck around when you're on set with
Hmm.
friends.
Yeah.
And fortunately, uh, the set was full of professionals. Like, it wasn't just buddies, farting around with a camera. This was a professional set, professional crew, and so it was easy to remember that there were people counting on you and waiting for you to stop cackling so you could make the day. But like Hard Denton, especially, he's just so funny, and Denny is so funny, and then Dylan and I get along really well as well. So there were too many opportunities to laugh. So it was unavoidable sometimes, and we did lose some time. But when we really needed to hunker down, and when Justin or Luke would come around the corner and be like, "Guys, shut the fuck up. We gotta we gotta make this day," then we were back on form. But it's hard when you're surrounded by contemporaries of yours with similar senses of humor to not uh, goof off a little bit. But you're professionals. You're being paid to do a
Yeah.
job, and all it takes is one scowl from behind the camera to really set people straight again. But yeah, it was my character is not as comedic as the others, and I suppose they found with the script they found quite a neat balance uh, between all of the different stylings of the different characters. And I know that before we'd cast Patrick, um, the script had a not a very different tone, but certainly the way that I'd envisioned it was slightly different. But then seeing him in the role, and especially seeing him on set, he became this tonal kind of catalyst for the rest of the movie. And I feel like at that point, everyone felt a little freer to play around in that sense. But obviously the themes of the movie, the through line of it's very serious. But I think that's one of my favorite forms of storytelling is, telling
Yeah.
truths and resonant truths through comedy. Because some of my favorite movies in the world are dark comedies. I've always been a big McDonough brothers fan. Um, and oftentimes it's those moments of levity that kind of contrast the more serious scenes and make them hit harder.
Yeah. It like lowers the kind of threshold for the audience to kind of put their guard down and then
Yeah.
absorb that message. And this film does that brilliantly. Speaking of Patrick, and also the commitment across the board from everybody, but his character is very much a mentor to these boys. Who were the people in your own life who've shaped your journey as a storyteller?
Wow, it's a good question. A lot of one's shaping in this industry happens kind of subconsciously or semi-consciously because
Yeah.
you bounce around so much and you can feel so scatterbrained because you build these families on different projects in different places, and they take months, but in the scale of a life, the brain kind of puts those in boxes in your head, and you don't quite know where you're sourcing your personality from, your skills from, or what have you. And so I'm never quite sure to whom I ought to credit different pieces of my professional character. But I do remember a pretty significant, I guess, realization being during Flipped. I worked with an astonishing actor named John Mahoney, and he died recently, or a few years ago. But he served as something of a mentor for me, perhaps unbeknownst to himself, to be honest. But just the way that he carried himself, just kind of uh, the apparent consummate professional that he was, but also the kindness with which he carried himself and the grace,
Mm.
the elegance as well, to say nothing of his talent, obviously. Uh, I've found myself seeing him occasionally when I think about how to conduct myself on a set or how I want people to perceive me on a set. So that's as direct as it gets. But of course, I've worked with so many astonishing people to whom I owe um, similar debts. It's just hard to name them. But
Yeah.
certainly, I mean, working with Rob Reiner at such an early age kind of locked me in to realizing that what I was doing and what we were all doing mattered, and to give the requisite shits, you know.
Yeah, it's gotta be so rewarding for storytellers that they're able to take a little bit of everybody that they've worked with and bring them to the next project. And you've also always been an actor who likes to keep things spontaneous and feed off the energy and the performances of your co-star. That's something that Luke and Justin fostered on this set. How did that environment and trust help you elevate your own performance and interpretation of this character? Is there a scene in particular that you're very excited for audiences to see?
It's interesting. It's there's two. I want to say that working with such dear friends, it opens those doors you described, but there's also an added level of anxiety because you're never
Mm.
quite sure if when you're in a professional environment with old friends, if the friendship is going to either be corrupted or take on a different quality of some kind. And so that was an anxiety of mine going, and I was like, I hope that working together and the kind of the rigors and strife of a high stress set doesn't poison any relationships that I had before now. But happily, everyone weathered those risks very well and very professionally, and we've come out of it better friends than ever before. But as far as the comfort to explore a character a little bit and to try different things, that was very true. It was the familiarity definitely made it much easier to step on set every day in a way that I haven't really experienced before. But also because this was an independent film, we didn't have
Yeah.
all the time in the world to work with. It was during COVID as well, so we were glad for every day that we finished without any sort of incident or anything. Um, I wasn't super inclined to stray too far from the script or from the direction. So I don't know how much experimenting I did, but I did notice that the general comfort and the
Yeah.
ease was higher than average.
You can really tell that you were all a good group of friends and how that's grown since time. And it
Mhm.
makes so much sense why the studio's not having you all do press together. I don't think you can.
Yeah, I don't think you'd get
But,
very many quality answers out of us when we're all together.
in addition to acting, you're also a novelist. Have you found that the work that you've done as a writer has impacted the way that you now approach your work as an actor or vice versa?
I don't think so. No, I think that they've been pretty well compartmentalized in my head because the sort of things that I write about and the sort of stuff that I enjoy reading, they're not projects that very often come my way that resemble that in the film and
Mm,
TV industry. I can't. This is one of the first projects that really feels like me. It feels like something that I might write. If the idea occurred to me at some point, I imagine that something like this would come out of my head, which is maybe why I love it so much. Uh, but yeah, normally I'm playing things that are a pretty far cry from the stuff that I'd write about, uh, but still coming out of my brain. So I'm sure it's informing it somehow. I just couldn't tell you how.
you touched upon this already, but you've also worked on projects of all sizes. What is it about independent filmmaking that excites you as a storyteller and an artist?
I mean, I think the most exciting part of it, uh, and this sometimes proves its downfall as well, but the most exciting part of it is that it is less burdened by the conventions of the industry and by the whole too many cooks in the kitchen situation. Which the more money you have, obviously, the more people are concerned intimately with the outcome. But for the Duel, I feel like the vision was pretty clear from day one. From the moment, at least for me, from the moment I first read that script, I knew within reason what it was going to look like and what they were going to do with it. And in the end, that's how it turned out. And I think that's one of the beautiful parts of independent filmmaking is for better or for worse, it is usually a more concise, concerted vision um, from fewer minds and
Mm.
often with a smaller budget. But the main thing is that you can feel that cohesion, I think, in most independent features.
Without giving any spoilers, I love films that you think are going in one direction and then completely flip it by the end. What was your reaction when you read the ending without giving any spoilers? And was that
It's
always
funny.
the ending?
Yeah. No, I feel like I know, and at the time especially, I knew Luke and Justin well enough that I knew that was going to happen. I knew that's where it was going, and I also because I think I would have been disappointed if something else had happened. Um, so without spoiling anything, yeah, I think as soon as I knew the through line of the movie and I knew what it was about, and I read and I felt the tone, uh, um, especially just of the dialogue, I knew the kind of movie that it was, and then necessarily how it would end.
Well, now I know that for any future projects that Luca and Justin make, the film has also made its way around the festival circuit. It's been incredibly well received. What do you think is resonating most with audiences? What has it been like getting to share this project with a live audience?
I've only seen it with a live audience a few times because I generally don't like to watch myself, so I
Mm.
normally flee the cinema uh, before it starts. But when I have seen it with a crowd, I think the first time I did was at Mammoth Film Festival, where it was very well received. It's always fascinating to hear when people laugh and when they respond audibly because it's different for every crowd and it's always different for me as well, and that's always a real joy. I can't imagine what it's like to have written it and to feel that feedback as
Yeah.
well. Um, but yeah, it does seem to be resonating with a lot of people, which I'm very glad about. And I think that's kind of a function of the times that we're living in right now and the conversations we're all having. I mean, this film is as much a celebration of as it is a condemnation of masculinity and some of its obviously more toxic constituents and
Mhm.
otherwise. And so I think people are finding themselves in these characters, which I think that's kind of what this industry is all about in the end.
Yeah. I got one final question for you. Outside of this
Hmm.
project, what's next for you?
I just filmed. I did a piece on a show in Ireland for like 6 weeks, but I don't think I'm allowed to talk about it yet. But so look forward to something like that, I guess. I wish I could tell you more about it. But the thing that I've really wanted to talk about, which hasn't received as much traction as I would have loved, is this movie that I shot even before we shot the Duel. I shot a movie called About Him and Her, which is this it's astonishing, beautiful movie, also an independent, about these two young, sort of disillusioned people whose phone lines get crossed. I think in the early '80s, and they fall in love over the phone, and then they decide to meet in a hotel room in a very strange and unusual way. Which is also mirrored by the way that we shot it, which I think is unprecedented. I don't want to spoil anything about it, but I'm pretty sure we're the only film uh, to have filmed it in the way that we did. So if anyone's interested in seeing, it's a slow burn and it's very artsy fartsy, and I think to its great benefit. But I'm really proud of it, and it's such an unusual um, filming process, which I think it's. I run the risk of spoiling the movie by telling you what was so unusual about it, but the movie tells you at the end. So go check out About Him and Her. It's gorgeous. You want to have patience with it. Sit down with it in the evening with a glass of wine or something and watch it. But it's beautifully written. Ice Mrozik is the director, and yeah, I think it's out on Amazon right now, but it's not very much watched. So I'd love for more people to take notice of it.